Hi there. In this lecture we see Capablanca playing against Amos Burn. So Amos Burn was a British master and was actually, his legacy includes the Burn variation. There's quite a bit on wiki, but the Burn variation of the French defence runs like this, where black plays d takes e4. I've had a lot of fun with this position with black accepting double pawns and blitz. So the Burn variation named after him is interesting, but yeah, check out his wiki. Very interesting player. So in this game, it's not a French defense. Burn plays e5. We have knight f3, knight c6, the Raul Capablanca a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and now the modest d3. So Capablanca had a few games where he seemed a bit frightened to let e4 go, but later he'd more frequently just play castling. We have d6, c3, bishop e7, knight bd2, black castles, and now knight f1, b5, bishop c2, d5. Now this energetic reaction in the center actually causes Capablanca to reconsider any h3, g4, knight g3 construction for the moment. Queen e2, supporting the center, avoiding the exchange of queens, is played. We have d takes e4, d takes e4, and now bishop c5. So this is criticised by Capablanca himself, actually, in annotations of this game. Basically, Capablanca thought that bishop e6 was more natural and effective, but it does set up a threat or two like bishop c4. That's a great use of the b5 pawn. And additionally, as well as setting up a new threat, it also means that bishop g5 is kept at bay as being very effective. With bishop c5 being played, bishop g5 is also now quite a horrible pin, and with that it kind of justifies potential use of that pin later. So yes, the bishop c5 does seem a little bit of a dodgy move actually overall, not just because there are other moves which sets up threats, because it also, it's against bishop g5. An alternative, what is another alternative? Rook b8 technically, and black could actually play like this with bishop d6. And if castling knight e7, just tango, get an excuse to tango the knight. I love that sort of thing. That should be an even position. So that seems to be a very interesting way of playing it as well. But yes, bishop c5 is kind of asking for some trouble. We have bishop g5, why not? Bishop e6, and now knight e3 just in time for bishop c4. Rook e8, white castles. Queen e7. Now this again is making the ideas of knight d5 quite dangerous. It seems black might have a least worst option here in just taking off e3 before it can potentially spring into d5. This position though, white does have an advantage. If h6, then we can actually first play rook fd1 to hit the queen, and then actually there is bishop takes f6 with knight d5. This position is nice for white. Nice big positional advantage. So anyway, queen e7 is just asking for this knight d5. Yes, it seems it's starting with bishop c5. This whole thing has just been made more effective. We have bishop takes d5. If queen d8, that would just be ridiculous. Bishop takes f6, and this position is just horrible for black. So bishop takes d5. E takes d5, and you can see it liberates white's position. This knight d5 theme is common in the Royal pairs generally. Fischer used it on a number of occasions, as well as other great masters. It kind of liberates the Royal pairs bishop, if nothing else. And in fact, after knight b8, because of this liberation of the bishop, there's actually an immediate tactic here which wasn't played, which actually guarantees white a big advantage. What do you think that is? Because there's also a potential downside here of black's position. For one moment, that rook is not connected either. So it's a very interesting scenario. What do you think for 100 points Capablanca missed? Capablanca plays a very natural positional move, a4, but in fact d6 has something going for it, creating an accessibility route to the unprotected piece. So if bishop takes d6, bishop takes f6, and we've all of a sudden got a soft spot here and an unprotected piece there. Bishop takes h7 is strong. This position, we can win the exchange. Ouch. without too much compensation. And you might think, is there another way of playing that as well? Let's just go there for a moment. There's also Queen e4, but it's not entirely as strong because Knight bd7 can be played. And this situation, you know, White does have the advantage though, so it is still playable, but it's just not as strong as bishop takes h7. And if king f8, you might ask, bishop e4, it just sits on the position. So even though we're not winning material, this is just a huge position to have. So it's an interesting shot, d6, tactically, but a4 was played. We have b4. Perhaps black's absolute best was just to, you know, leave the pawn to be taken, because b4 gives a very juicy c4 square. So this, as a kind of gambit, b4 might be the best bet. If a takes b5, a takes this situation, black can actually get in e4 and then take on d4, and actually this situation is about even. So actually a better way of playing it is actually b4 first, and after bishop d6, then consider this. It's slightly nuanced. It's slightly an improvement. Yeah, without any, you know, bishop takes d4 possibility. So here we can actually pin e4 as well. There's other options. And if rook takes a1, e4, yeah, we can still pin and even take out e4 there. So yeah, it's b4 seems overall stronger if that pawn was left. But anyway, b4 was played from black, giving the c4 square. And we have c takes b4, and this gives a semi-open c file as well. And black's structure has been somewhat wrecked here on the queen side. We have now bishop takes f6. And there is again this dangerous theme of h7 and a8 lurking in the background here. We have queen takes f6. If black played g takes f6, what do you think again is like a crushing theme here for 100 points in this position? Yeah, d6 here. It creates that accessibility route to another downside. So we got two downsides. And if bishop takes, we've just played queen e4. And this is threatening a 1-2 knockout. It'll be checkmate there. So this is actually even worse than the other variation. We're actually winning a whole rook. You know, otherwise, if this knight moves, let's put that on the board. Queen takes h7 check. Queen h8 is checkmate. So yes, fascinating stuff. That really is, you know, crushed there. And if c takes, there's even three things attacked because that queen's not even protecting the bishop. Yeah, it's just totally devastating. So queen takes f6 was played, but now queen e4 anyway, and it's hitting b4 and h7. We have bishop d6, so queen takes h7 check, king f8, and now knight h4. Black plays queen h6. Very dangerous position if he doesn't. If knight d7, queen h8 check, king e7, knight f8, knight f5 check, and here queen takes g7 is possible, just winning another pawn. So yes, that's really unpalatable stuff. And you might think, well, what about queen takes f5? Then we throw in queen takes e8 check, and then bishop takes f5. Thanks very much. So okay, so queen h6, queen takes h6, g takes, and now knight f5. And you can see how fragmented black's pawns are on both sides of the board. And the h pawn is very difficult now to actually hold on to. I tried bishop d1. We have knight d7, yeah, giving up the h pawn. If h4, knight takes h4, big advantage for white. So knight d7. Now at least, you know, black is aiming to fork if the bishop takes, you know, fork d5 and h5. But Capablanca is not too bothered about that. He actually welcomes that bishop e2. Yeah, this is a very good move. If bishop f3, then that does run into a little bit e4. It's still better for white, but bishop e2, might as well just play bishop e2 straight off the bat. Knight takes d5, rook fd1. So white has a passed h-pawn here to push. A very nice knight on f5. Very nice semi-open c-file. Very nice a-pawn target as well. A lot of positional trump cards. Knight f4, bishop c4, rook ed8. So we have h4, a5, at least getting out of the firing line of the bishop. G3, knight e6. And now, yeah, this is... yeah, knight e6 is asking for something horrible, isn't it, really? The doubling of the pawns. But, yes, maybe, you know, knight g6 is going to run into h5 at some point. It doesn't look too good either way. There are lots of ways to win this for white. But this is a bit positionally terrible, the structure of black. After bishop takes e6, f takes knight e3. We have rook db8, knight c4. It's a very juicy knight, suppressing the b-file activity, holding b2, but also hitting a5. So black is getting a bit strained here, just protecting pawn weaknesses. Rook ac1, rook a7. Meanwhile, yeah, now there's e5 under fire, king f6, rook e4, rook b4. And now we have g4. This is a really nifty idea, keeping the king out of f5, but also this rook lift to sort of try and push these pawns after. This is just a strategically won position. We have rook a6, rook c3, bishop c5, rook f3 check, king g7, b3. Yeah, white is really dominating the position. Black is really kind of helpless here. We have bishop d4, okay, trying to cling on to the pawn for a bit, potentially. But, you know, king g2. There is a little bit of a trick here, actually, to point out. There is the trick, bishop takes f2 check, and taking out e4. Okay, but even then, you know, it's not entirely clear. But king g2, why bother with that? Allowing that sort of tactic. Rook a8, g5, rook a6. If rook a b8, then white can actually just address this by taking on a5, just protecting the b pawn. Yeah, that's just horrible, isn't it? So rook a6, black is really just tied up, waiting for these two connected passed pawns to crash through. So in desperation now, Amos BurnSan sacks the exchange, and we have rook c6, and now, yeah, white doesn't need to worry about this because there's two connected passed pawns. So guess what was played, which ended the game for 10 points. Yeah, g6. The hooks are important of passed pawns. The f7 hook in particular. So black resigned. If rook takes c4, then rook f7 check, and if king h6, g7, and we're just going to be queening soon. Yeah, there's no problem really. So, yeah, if rook c2, you know, h7 check, and then we're going to be queening. So, yeah, it's pretty hopeless after g6. That hook is very useful, the f7 one, to help drive the pawns forward. Okay, so what do we say about this game? Yeah, the move which really put black in a really serious position was actually bishop c5. Yeah, when bishop e6 or other moves like rook ab8 for a knight swinging into g6, there are other plans in the position, but this really maximized the effectiveness of this relative pin and this whole knight d5 theme. That is a big theme in the Royal Pairs, and it was kind of made even more effective with this bishop c5. So an interesting moment there, how black went downhill from this moment. It's very instructive in my view. I hope you enjoyed this as much as me. Thanks so much.